believe in the gun. And our players don't use it most days. They use it every day.
In my 20 years as head coach, I've used the gun every single year. Well, my dream as a coach that everybody would grow up with the gun, because getting all those reps would make my job a lot easier.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom McDonald from the NABC Championship Webinar Series. I'm on the board of directors, the two-year college coach rep, along with Troy Hilton, who's on the NABC staff. Before we get to Coach Huggins, I just want to give some special thanks to Jim Haney, Reggie Mitten, again, Troy Hilton, Eric Weberg, and the Gun for being a sponsor of this to make it happen. The reception and the viewership has been off the charts. Sideline Interactive is on board. They're going to give away an 8-foot LED, free shipping, $11,000 board for somebody at the end of this series of webinars. Craig Reed from KBA, great guy, and his family. All the coaches that have been stuck at home that can't get in their office to do these webinars, they've sent them marker boards, clipboards, magnetic boards. Mike Bray for being the president, past president of the NABC, and all the support, encouragement, and help in speaking. And then Jamie Dixon, who's now our president of the NABC and speaking also, and just all the help and encouragement and support, all of the board of directors for the NABC, all the help they've given on social media and their time and efforts. Championship Productions, Bill Bergen, Nate Landis, and Daryl Bennett. And with that, I'm going to move to the introduction phase of this. Our next guest is Bob Huggins from West Virginia. His bio is absolutely unbelievable. I'm just going to try to hit some major points. He's been at West Virginia. He's 2015 Big 12 Coach of the Year, 2015 Jim Thalen National Coach of the Year, over 850, but I'll give you the exact number in a second. USA Coach of the Year, NABC member for 37 years. But what I really find amazing is his longevity and his consistent winning pattern or coaching. Walsh, he was at NAI for 2 years. He was 71-26, a 73% winning percentage. Akron, one NCAA appearance, 97-48, 68% winning percentage. Cincinnati, he was 399-127 for 76% winning percentage. 2 NIT appearances and 14 NCAA. 1 year at Kansas State, they were 23-12, 66%, 1 NIT. West Virginia, 1 NIT, 10 NCAAs. Coach, I gave you another one for this year, and CBI for 289 and 158 for 65%. His overall winning record right now is 879 and 369 for 71%. The next thing, I know Coach is ready to go, but he played and then being a graduate assistant and being an assistant, he was at West Virginia, then Ohio State, Walsh, where he's a head coach, and then he went to Central Florida for a year, and then he went to Akron as the head coach, Cincinnati, Kansas State, and to West Virginia. Well, with that, Coach, I'd like to warmly welcome you. That was a long introduction, but well-deserved for you and what you've done for the basketball world. I will say one last thing, because you're probably saying shut up, is every time I've ever called Coach Huggins for anything, and I mean anything, he's always been so helpful and gracious and, helpful beyond belief. So with that, Coach, Troy and I welcome you to the NABC Championship Webinar Series.
Thank you.
My first question, Coach, is this. I know how important education is, and I know how well you did in school. So my question is, as you were coming up, playing for your father, which I'm going to get to in a little bit, and all the people in your background, I just wondered if you could talk about all the people that laid the groundwork for you, from your high school coach, your father, your family, and then also Eldon Miller and all the coaches you worked with. I just wondered if you could talk about that, just the influence of education. Most of the coaches on here are high school educators, coaches, and teachers. So I just thought we'd start with that and then go on.
Well, obviously my father being a high school coach, actually I was born here in Morgantown. I lived here till I was somewhere between 9 and 10. And my dad was a junior high coach here in Morgantown. And obviously, he'd throw me in the car and take me to practice. And then he went to Ohio, became a high school coach, very successful high school coach, Ohio Basketball Hall of Fame, and so forth. And what I didn't know when we moved to Ohio was I was going to play for him. It really wasn't optional. I didn't get a vote. So I played for him for 4 years and really learned a lot. I think a lot of what we do comes from him. I learned a lot from Ed McCluskey, who really belongs in the Naismith Hall of Fame. He's, in my mind, one of the greatest high school coaches that's ever put on a whistle. And I got to spend a lot of time with Coach. And then when I went to Walsh, I would go over pick him up, and he wasn't seeing real well at that time. It was amazing to me how many things he could pick up and see that, here I am, whatever, 20, 25, 26 years old. He could see that I couldn't see. And spent a lot of time with him, just a lot of time in his basement. He had little men that you move around, and a lot of what we do actually comes from him. And so, I owe him a lot. Went to the Philadelphia 76ers, got unceremoniously cut. It's actually a good story, but I don't know that I can tell it on this. There's probably some words in there that you can't use, but excuse me. Being there for a week with Doug Collins and Dr. J and World Be Free and Daryl Dawkins and so forth and so on was a great experience for me. And then I came back here. I really I had no idea what I wanted to do would be. So I thought about being a lawyer, but it's too late to get into law school. And my coach here, Jody Gardner, said, "Why don't you come be a GA for me?" And so I was a GA here for a year. Coach Gardner got fired, and I didn't have a job. I called a very, very dear friend of mine, Chuck Meshock, who just passed away. And I know probably a lot of people on this remember Chuck. Great coach, great person. And he said, "Let me see what I can do." And he called me back a couple of days later. He said, "I just talked to Coach Miller. He wants to talk to you." Coach Miller actually grew up. I lived in high school. I lived in Port Washington, Ohio. Coach Miller lived in Jeanette Hutton, Ohio, which is about 5 miles away. And 5 miles the other way was Woody Hayes, who was the football coach at Ohio State at that time. So Coach Miller, we had a little interview deal, and he said, "Come work for me." I went to Ohio State, worked 2 years for Coach Miller, got to spend some time with Coach Hayes. Coach Hayes was great to me, being that I was a Tuscarawas County guy as he was. So I got to be around greatness, at an early age, and got really tired of traveling and recruiting, and I was gone probably 5 days a week, sometimes 6, and I wanted to coach. I never got to really be on the floor very much at Ohio State. So I decided to take the Walsh College job. Actually, my dad took it, and he was going to be the coach there until he found out how much they were paying. And then he said, "I really can't do this, but my son would do a great job." And so they called me, and, as they say, I went to work for basically free, and had a great time. My first game, I counted, there were 37 people in the stands. 37. 3 of them were brothers of Christian Instruction. They came in and had their cardigan sweaters on, read a book the first half, and left at halftime. And I said to my assistant, Dan Peters, who a very, very dear friend of mine and a great coach, I said, "Pete, we're going to get so good they're going to have to stay for the whole game." And we did. My last year there, 34-1, and he stayed there a couple of years after I left. I left to go to Florida for Chuck, to be with Chuck Meshock, who had gotten me really started. Got me started at Ohio State. And, he just wouldn't let me say no. So I went there for a year, and then got a great opportunity to go to Akron. Akron for 5. Had a great time in Akron. Learned a lot, and then got an opportunity to go to Cincinnati. 5 people interviewed. This is a pretty interesting thing. There's 5 people interviewed. The first question that the AD asked me when I sit down, I think I was the 4th guy interviewed. He said, "What's the last book that you read?" And I said, "When Glory Mattered." And he said, "Okay, tell me about the book." So I told him a little bit, about the book, whatever. The last question that he asked me was, "What's the last book you read?" I said, "When Glory Mattered." He said, "Tell me a little bit about the book." So I told him a little bit about the book. So I get the job, and so one day we're going somewhere, and I said, "Why did you ask me twice what's the last book that I read?" He said, "Because I eliminated 3 guys in the interview because they gave me a different book from the beginning to the end. And I knew if they would lie about that, they would lie about a lot of other things." How about that, Tom?
That's pretty good.
Did I answer a question?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
I do have one. I want to go a little bit deeper on one, because you talked about your dad. He's in the Hall of Fame in 1993 and in 2016. He was in the Ohio Hall of Fame, but he's also in the Coaches Hall of Fame. Just so you know what Coach said, he was 27-0 in 1967, won the state championship. 1972, won the state championship. Won the state championship in 1976. Was the runner-up in 73 and 75. His career record as a high school coach was 398 and 74. 8 league championships, 15 sectional championships, 10 district championships, 8 regionals. And the big thing that he talked about that I learned was this Ohio basketball camp that he ran from 69 to 10. So my question to you is this. He wasn't just a coach. I mean, I've heard you speak probably 15, 20 times at clinics. I know how much he meant to you. But what was it like to play for your dad? And then what were some of the things, how was he? What was he like to just learn from?
He was hard. He was really hard. I started as a freshman for him, and of course I didn't have a clue, and I'm coming from another school district. He moved into the school district so I could play for him, and I was used to kind of doing whatever I wanted to do, and that came to a very quick halt. And so I'm actually the all-time leading scorer at 2 different high schools, which is something that you don't know very many people who are the all-time leading scorer at 2 different high schools.
No, I don't know anybody.
Freshman, sophomore year with him at Canaan Valley High School. He then moved me to Indian Valley South, and which you mentioned all the accolades from his time at Indian Valley South. But yeah, and then I was all-time leading scorer at Indian Valley South. How about that?
That's unbelievable.
So my dad was hard to play for. Really, really hard to play for. For me, he it was kind of. He did a lot of interviews and things because he was very intriguing. He won so much, and he was kind of quirky about some things, and so they wrote a lot about him, and it was always like, well, do you take it home? If you have a bad practice do you take it? Oh, absolutely not. We wouldn't do that. When you go home, that's kind of a safe place. That's probably the biggest lie that I've ever heard anyone tell, because he did take it home. I can remember one interview, a guy asked him, he said, "Coach, how many children do you have?" He said, "I've got 3 boys and 4 others." As he referred to my sisters, others. So it was, but I played for him. My brother Harry played for him and went on to play at Rice, and my brother Larry played for him and went on to play at Ohio State. So he did something.
So here's my next question, and I'll ask Troy. West Virginia is an assistant, Ohio State is an assistant, and then the head coaching experience, and then going to assistant again, and then getting ready for Akron. How did all that, most guys don't get to be like an assistant coach right away. I mean, or like when you got to Virginia and being West Virginia. But what kind of things across over those 7 years put you in a great position to be the head coach at Akron. What'd you get from those coaches?
Well, I think what nobody understood at that time, and I don't think people are aware of now, I probably coached 200 to 300 games before I ever got to be an assistant at West Virginia. My dad had the camp. I was slave labor. That's working and never getting paid. And that was, getting up early, going out, doing the layups of figure eight things, all those kind of things. And then I had a station, and my dad had a station, Coach McCluskey had a station, and I had a station. And so I had stations all morning. I then had figure eights and free throws during lunch. And then I had a station again in the afternoon. And then I coached my team that night, 2 games a night, and officiated when I wasn't coaching. So, and that went on for a long time. That started when I was a freshman in high school and went on until I got the job here at West Virginia. And the greatest rule ever passed by the NCAA, Troy, the greatest ever, was you couldn't be a college coach and work at camp. That was not your, if it was your university camp, you could work it, but you couldn't go work a private camp. And so my dad kept calling me, I need you. I kept saying, Dad, violation of rules, man. I can't break rules. I can't. So I got out of having to go to camp after that. But I had probably coached 200-300 games before I ever got here to West Virginia to be an assistant.
That is something that's missing anymore, that camp business, the camp learning experience. Troy, you got anything?
This is maybe a loaded question, may not even have an answer, but so many different stops, and obviously you learn from all of them, but is there one you look back on and think that was one that really was probably the most influential?
Well, I learned different things at different places. I'm coming off of playing here at West Virginia, and then all of a sudden I'm on the floor and they put a whistle around my neck, But I'm coaching the guys I played with for the most part. There were some freshmen, whatever, but the majority of the guys, I played with them. So it was kind of, you learn a lot about how to deal with people, because I'm used to being their buddy and, going down to, Miss Anson and have a cold beer, after practice with them. Yeah, obviously you can't do that when you're assistant coach. So, so I think I learned about coaching on the floor stuff. And then I went to Ohio State, and what I did was I scouted every opponent, and I recruited. It's kind of funny. Like people say, well, like, how long did you know so-and-so? Like, how long did you know Tom Izzo? Tom Izzo and I started the same year, and we were both the lone man on the totem pole, so we were both out every day. So we spent a lot of time together. Joey Meyer, we spent a lot of time together. So I learned different things at different places. I wasn't on the floor very much at Ohio State. I was on the road. I was traveling. But what that enabled me to do was meet a lot of coaches, meet a lot of high school coaches, and it was great back then. I think Troy, we've screwed things up to a large degree. We've cut the high school coaches out of the deal, and I understand why and the whole thing. But I would leave Columbus, Ohio, and if I was going to Detroit, I would stop at, who knows, 3 or 4 high schools on the way to where I wanted to be. But if I was going to Clarkston, Michigan, I'd stop in Toledo. I'd go to high schools in Detroit. And so I got to meet a whole lot of high school coaches. I got to sit down X and O, talk about different things offensively, defensively, with a whole bunch of high school coaches, very bright guys. And that was great for me. And it also, then all of a sudden you start to build up a little bit of a network. And so when I went to Walsh, I could go into Detroit and recruit guys, which they had never really had done very much. I could go into Michigan. I could go into Indiana. I could go into Pennsylvania. I could go into places because I'd been there when I was at Ohio State. And I always stopped and went in and we had lunch or, we did whatever. We X and O a little bit and then I'd move on to the next high school. So that was really, really good for me in terms of networking and knowing people outside of my comfort zone, outside of, my dad's people and the camp people. So I got to know people outside of that. And then, so when I went to Walsh, I had a bigger network, I think, than anybody coaching at that level had. So I had my hands on more players, and I think that really helped. And then I went to Central Florida just to help Chuck Meshock, but kind of the same thing. He's like, hey, you need to go get to know these Florida guys. We need to have a presence in Florida. Well, Central Florida at that time was behind Florida State, Miami, whoever else. There probably were a lot of others. And so here I am running around South Florida, running around all over Florida, meeting coaches in Florida. So when I got to Akron, two of the first guys I signed were Florida guys to go to Akron. And even though I grew up an hour from Akron and knew everybody in that area, but it really helped. It helped expose me to a different region of the country that I really wasn't very familiar with, and meeting people there. So, so 2 years at Ohio State, I did that. I'm at Walsh. I try to follow up on those things at Walsh, and then obviously leaving Central Florida, going to Akron. And I mean, that was a crazy deal. The president called me and said, "Are you ready to come home?" And Dominic Gazzetta, one of the great guys of all time. And Dr. Gazzetta said, "Are you ready to come home?" I'm like, "Can I ask who this is?" He said, "This is President Gazzetta at Akron. Are you ready to come home?" "Yes, sir." He said, "Okay." He said, "It's going to take a little while. We got to kind of do this thing right, and it's got to go through some channels. But don't worry, you're my guy." And, about 3.5 weeks go by before they actually even bring me in for an interview. And by that time, I'm trying to get the Edinburgh job, and, some D2 jobs and stuff. And next thing I know, they called, said, "Come in for an interview." And the assistant AD showing me around campus. And I said, "What do you think's going to happen here?" He goes, "What are you talking about? They brought 7 guys in yesterday and you today. Figure it out." So I'm like, I think I got a pretty good chance. So I get the Akron job, 5 years there, and then go to Ohio State and actually remembered the last book that I read. So I got that done. Something.
Coach, my question is work ethic. Anytime you mention Bob Huggins, people talk about how hard your teams play, you work, and your staff. How do you get your players and your whole staff, everybody on the same page culture-wise, that's just the way we're going to be?
Well, I grew up, Tom, you didn't get to vote on that. There was no, my dad never held an election. It was, boy, get your over there and go do this. And I can remember our first day ever of opening up the camp. And we had to work like dogs. And they were asphalt courts outside. Atwood Lake they were getting rid of these cabins that they used to rent out, and they were kind of run down a little bit. So my dad goes over, gets the cabins, brings them over, and that's what the coaches stayed in. And then we had a couple barracks kind of built for the campers, and he's all ready to go, man. So I'm in there. I stayed up. I'll never forget. I stayed up until about 4:45 in the morning, finished painting in what we called the Barnasium. It was a barn, pole building barn that he turned into an arena, as he called it. It was a barn. We called it the Barnasium. So I finished painting in there, and my brother was holding the lamp. There was no lights or anything in it then. He's holding the lamp, and I'm painting. And 4:05, I go down, I lay my head down. 5:30, my dad comes running in. Are you going to sleep all day? And he's shaking the bed and all this and that. And I mean, it's raining as hard as I've ever seen it rain. He said, jump in the back of the pickup. He jumps in the front by himself. And my brother and I are in the back of the pickup, and my best friend, who was there helping me. And so we go down. This is a gospel truth, and it's funny, but it's not funny. So he backs up to the railroad track. We got coal shovels. So we got these coal shovels. And you ever try to shovel slag? What slag is, right? It's not gravel, it's slag. And so we're trying to shovel this slag. You only get about 4 or 5 of them on a shovel, and we're throwing them in the back. And it's raining now. I got my head down, and I'm throwing this slag in there, and he's hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. Now he never got out of the truck. But he's screaming at us, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. We're throwing this slag in the back. He said, come on, let's go. So, I mean, I know when he says go, he means go. So I jump in. Well, my buddy kind of like crawls in, and my dad takes off, and my buddy, poor guy, I mean, he's just sitting down, and he does like a 1.5 out of the back of the truck. I'm not very happy, so I'm beating on the hood, or the roof of the pickup, and tell him, stop, 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 stop. He pokes his head out the window, and my buddy's his nickname was Bone. He said, Bone, quit fooling around. We got too much work to do. He had just did a 1.5 gainer out of the back of the truck into the field. And so now I'm mad. So I said to my dad, you can't, I'm not doing it anymore, man. I'm not stealing slag off the railroad tracks. You know what he says to me, Tom? I'm not stealing anything. I'm a Christian. You know that. I'm not stealing anything. He said, I made a deal with the railroad. I let them use my land to come through. They let me get all the slag I wanted. And I said, at that time, I said, there's no sense arguing with the guy. He's gonna talk his way out of it anyway. So we went and got more slag. Threw it on the road, didn't do any good.
What's been the most rewarding thing as a coach for you?
Relationships with players. With this coronavirus deal going on, it's my phone. I would say rings off the hook, but it doesn't ring anymore. It just kind of beeps, because I got a text message. But getting text messages, just hey man, hope you're okay. Hope the family's okay. Love you. Just from former player after former player after former player. And then I think, you kind of know when your guys love you, think the world of you, genuinely care about your health and well-being, you've probably done some things right. And so that to me that's priceless. I mean, that's better than anything that could ever happen.
All right. You and I have talked about this many times at games and at camps and clinics. What's it like? How has it changed, or has it changed, coaching at the beginning to now getting accountability for your student athletes?
How has it changed? I think the biggest thing is there's so many more resources. There's so many more, when I was in school here, study hall was, hey, go back to your dorm room and study. That was what the coaches, the study hall deal was. And, a couple guys did, most of them didn't, but now the resources that we have with study halls, the tutorial, just everything, the teaching aids that people have at their disposal now is great, and I mean, there's a lot of things, man. I think we've made some rules that are ridiculous. I mean, totally ridiculous. I think, quite frankly, we're about to make another one that's totally ridiculous. I mean, being able to transfer and play immediately is absurd. I'm a transfer, and the greatest thing that happened to me athletically and academically was I had to sit out a year. So I practiced every day. I didn't play in the games. I didn't travel, but I had time to be a student, which I think enabled me. I mean, I graduated magna cum laude. I was nominated for the Rhodes Scholar. All the things. But because I learned how to study the year that I had off, and athletically, I mean, I had time to work on my game. I knew better what I had to work on, what I had to get better at to be able to play and be successful at this level. I thought it was a great thing. I talked to Cal the other day, and Cal said the same thing. The transfer year was a great year. And now we're saying, okay, you can run and you can go play over here, one-time transfer, the grad transfer. The whole grad transfer deal was to transfer because they didn't have the curriculum that you wanted to study, but this other school did. I understand it. I'm good with all that. I'm not good with they go over there and they never thought about taking that curriculum. And how many of them really leave with master's degrees? And because I was a transfer, I left after my senior year of playing. And it's like, how did you get, Cincinnati, West Virginia? I had a master's degree. I had a master's degree when I graduated from college. I graduated with 2 degrees. I graduated undergrad and a master's. So I thought it was a great thing. And there's nothing wrong with transfer. But, and I think this, and Troy's heard me say this many, many times. What about the guys you left behind? What about those guys? Do they matter? You got 13 guys. So say you have 3 guys or 4 guys graduate, and then you have 2 guys decide, well, I want to try it over here. So they transfer over here. Now all of a sudden, by the time they do that, it's hard to bring in somebody to replace them. And if they're good, like I have a very dear friend who lost his job because they said to him, you didn't have a hard enough schedule, so why you didn't get in the NCAA tournament. So he went and scheduled the world. But he had 4 really good players back. And so he makes this schedule. They have a great summer. Boom. 4 of them leave. They can't win a game. He gets fired. How's that his fault? What about those other guys who didn't win a game that are sitting there? Those other 9 guys, do they matter? I just think it's a very selfish, thing to do. Transferring's not bad, but you shouldn't transfer and be eligible immediately. All that is trying to get more guys to transfer. It's just, we got a transfer portal, 800 kids. Come on, man. How can we say that's good? What are you supposed to do? You've created an empire for yourself here with championship products. What if somebody come in and say, Tom, time for you to move out, I'm moving in. How would you wouldn't like that, right? And I don't know how a guy who's spent 2 years or 3 years in a program, busting his butt, getting better, all of a sudden, boom, here comes a transfer guy. By the way, I got your spot. Go where it's out. It's not right.
I'm right there with you. I'm going to turn to you, what you've done for coaches. And I mean, like guys that have worked for you and they've gotten better jobs. And I mean, better as in head coaching and all this stuff. What do you try to instill in those guys and your players for the future as a father, I guess, an employee and a coach and a college, a head coach? What do you try to do? What are you trying to teach them?
What am I going to instill in Frank Martin? Frank's bigger than I am. I think what we all do and Frank's fortunate because as a high school guy, he was around a great coach. I mean, an absolute great coach at Miami Senior. And he was fortunate enough to be around. And then Frank was one of those guys who was really smart. He was a really smart high school guy because, you know, he had good players, but when coaches came in, he spent time with them. You know, he asked questions. I spent more time with Frank when he was a high school coach than I did when he worked for me. You know, because you're recruiting, you're scouting, you're doing all those things. You know, my president at Kansas State asked me one time, said, what made you hire Frank first? I said, I got more, that's the only way I could get a player. I couldn't recruit one of his players. He sent him somewhere else. So if I was going to get a player from Frank, I had to have him on my staff. And you know, and I said jokingly, but it's true, but I hired Frank because of his work ethic, you know, because his love for basketball. And Frank and I got along great. Frank and I spent a lot of time teaching each other basketball. You know, and then I got Andy Kennedy, you know, and Andy's got a great mind. It doesn't always work for the right reasons, but he's got a great mind. I'm teasing that kid. But, you know, I mean, you spend time with those, you learn from them. I mean, everybody wants to ask me, what did my assistants learn from me? It's more, what do I learn from them? You know, I learned so much from Frank, so much from AK, so much from Dan Peters, so much from John Lawyer. I mean, I've been blessed, man. I've been blessed. I've had great guys. I've had great guys who love basketball. There's more than one way to do things, you know. And I think if you spend all of your time going in one direction, and by God, this is the way it is, which I could have done because of my dad, you know, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be able to branch out and explore other things that maybe could make us better.
I'm going to ask you one question that has three questions, and then I'm going to go to Troy. What scouting? What do you look for? What's your biggest keys in scouting? And then what do you look at stats at halftime at the end of the game that tells you, hey, we were really playing well or not? What are those three things? Scouting and then stats.
Well, obviously, how do they score? They usually score because we throw it to them. But how do they score? What do they run? How can we take it away? How can we take away what they want to do? How can we make them uncomfortable? We spend a lot of time trying to make other people uncomfortable. Spend a lot of time, if this is what they want to run, we're going to do our best and not let them run it. To make them play faster if they don't want to play fast. To make them play slower. You know, it depends. It depends on who we're playing. And what else do you ask me?
Stats, like at halftime at the end of the game. What are your indicators of playing well or things you look at first?
I generally look at rebounding first because I think that's effort related. I think that's something that if you want to, you can be very good at. You know, I tell our guys all the time, nobody's ever got one, didn't try. You know, I guess once in a while they bounce to you, but guys just don't get rebounds if they don't try to get. How about try to go get one? I mean, actually, you know, I tell our bigs, you know, maybe if you got one once, you'd like it. You might want to do it again. You know, try it once, see if you like it. You know, but rebounding is really important. It's a possession. You know, it gives the offense another possession, or it limits the opponent's offense to one possession. I think that's important. I think field goal percentage is important. You know, but generally, if I look at field goal percentage and somebody's field goal percentage is a lot higher than what I think it ought to be, the next thing I look at is our turnovers. You know, because we have a propensity to be very charitable and throw the ball to the wrong team. You know, I've had point guards where, you know, they're like, Coach, how can I get better? Okay, let me help you. Try to keep it between the black lines. and try to throw it to the guys that have the same color shirt you have on. And if you do that, that's a hell of an improvement. You know, it's a very complex game. And it's complex because you do one simple thing to the next, to the next, to the next in a very rapid succession, which makes it complex. Now, the individual things are really not that hard to do. But you do one, and then very quickly you have to do another one, and then very quickly you have to move on to another one, and another one, and another one. And pretty soon you're like, I got to do all this? You know? It's kind of like you asking questions. You know, it goes from one to a big long list in a very rapid succession.
I take that as a compliment. Troy, take that. You're next.
Meant that way.
My question, kind of circling back to the assistant coaches. You said that when you were at Ohio State, you very rarely got on the floor. It was always recruiting and scouting. Did that affect how you treat your current assistant coaches and what assignments you give them?
Different world now, Troy. I mean, as you know, I mean, the game has changed. The rules have changed. You can't do what I did. You can't go in 5 high schools in one day. Because now we said you can't go in once school starts and you can't enter the high school until the school ends. So I used to go in there and have coffee with the guy, the first guy. You know, the second guy I would go in and maybe have a sandwich with him and then go real fast so I could go over and finish lunch with another guy and then get another guy when school was ending and then go where I had to go. You can't do that. We've legislated that out of our game. So it's different. I mean, it's different how we recruit. Now we have recruiting periods. When I started, there was no recruiting periods. You know, my first deal at Ohio State, they said, go to 5-star camp up in the mountains. I didn't. Okay, whatever you need me to do. So I go to Honesdale. I'm up there. I don't know what's going on there. I mean, it wasn't like when you walked in, they give you a roster. You had to chase Garf around to get the roster, and then Garf knew whether you paid or not. You know, whether you took his service. And I didn't know. I didn't know any of that. And so I'm following this guy with a limp around who's, you know, carrying a satchel with all the rosters in it, and I can't get one. You know, and I don't know what's going on. Then I realized, oh, where am I staying? Everything was full. I mean, there weren't a whole lot of hotels there. You know, so now we're talking about like a 2-hour drive or more to get back, try to find a hotel. And Ray Jones, you know Ray Jones, little Ray. Ray said, I got 2 beds in my room. You want to stay with me? Ray, I'd love to. I'll split the room. No. You don't split the room. You know, you're a young guy in the business, you know, I'm fine, school's paying for it, whatever. I walk in, he's got guns laying all over the bed. I'm like, what the hell did I just walk into here? And Ray went up a week early and went bird hunting. So he's got all these shotguns and rifles and stuff laying all over the bed. I'm afraid to close my eyes, you know, but it's different, man. It's just so different, and we could spend so much more time together because you would go to 5-star. You would pretty much stay at 5-star. You would go to BC and Rensselaer, Indiana, watch all day, go to the truck stop, get something to eat, wake up, go back and watch all day, and chase Bill Cronin around trying to get, you know, rosters from Bill, and it's not like that now. You know, now we fly in, we watch 2 kids, we go out, we get on a plane and we fly somewhere else. Or we get in Vegas and we sit in traffic for, 2 hours, trying to get around to get to all the different gyms and things. It's just, Troy, it's so different. You can't imagine the difference. But before you got to spend time with guys, like I heard Billy Hahn when I came here, everybody's like, how do you know Billy? I mean, like, I visited Maryland as a high school kid. Billy was a freshman on the freshman team. Billy showed me around. It's the reason I didn't go to Maryland. Billy showed me around. But, I knew Billy since I was, 17 years old. And then seeing Billy on the road, Billy and I always got a bite to eat, sat and watched, evaluated together. And back then, guys would say, "Hey, Hugs, hey, that guy there, he'd be good for you. He'd be good for you." And most of them really weren't trying to con you. Most of them were sincere in that, I watched you guys play. That guy was a good player the way you guys play. That don't happen anymore. But we're not there long enough either. We're in, we're out. And I feel bad. I've said this for a long time. I feel bad for young coaches because it's so much harder.
Coach, I know you passed on a lot of players over the years that don't fit your program. How do you identify players that do fit your program and culture?
Not very well. I always wanted to be. I always wanted to be one of those places where you could select. Never was. But I always wanted to be. I thought that'd be really neat. Okay, we need a small forward. Let's go get Michael Jordan. Oh, we need a power forward. Oh, that guy up in New York getting bad. What's his name? Sam. Yeah, let's get that guy. Come on. I mean, I've never had a place like that. And I'm not picking on Roy. Roy and I are very, very dear friends. Very dear friends. But that's a different animal than being at Cincinnati, Cincinnati, who do we get? We went and tried to get the guys that ran the fastest, jumped the highest because of the way we played. And we couldn't. I've never been in a place where we could select. I always wanted to, though. I thought it'd be fun for once.
Troy's got a question for you.
Got a viewer sent in, asked one if you would be willing to answer a recruiting question.
Sure.
It's Frank from Columbia. Wants to know if you'd share the recruiting story about the 7-footer in Manhattan in the ice storm.
I will if he'll share the recruiting story of the stop between Kansas City and Manhattan, the emergency stop that we had to make. If he shares that one, I'd love to share that. Now we had a 7-foot guy in Kansas for some reason only known to whomever. It starts hailing every once in a while, and I didn't know. I'd just gotten there. Frank didn't know, and so I'm driving the car. Big fella's sitting in the passenger side, and Frank's in the back with the mother, maybe the mother and the father, and the kid's like rolls the window down. Well, the coming in hitting him. Oh! I'm like, put the window up, man. So he gets the window up, and then he rolls it down. He sticks his hand out. He's going to try to catch one. And they're they're not baseball size, but you could use them to play baseball, stickball, like we used to play. And it was hitting him in the arm and stuff. Well, one of them hits him, and the arm goes back and hits his mother right between the eyes. Right square between the eyes. And he's going, ooh, ooh, ooh. And he's grabbed, but he never put his arm in. It was like, that was a very interesting visit, Troy. Sometime I might buy you a cocktail and tell you some stories about that trip. You got to get Frank to tell the story though on emergency stuff.
I'm in. You just tell me.
It's a great story.
Did you sign the kid? Did you sign the kid?
Yes, we did.
There you go.
Yes, we did. We used to take bets. We would. I think about the staff I had: Frank, Delonte Hill, Brad Underwood. Josh was on my staff. We had a great staff. An absolutely great staff. So we would bet two things before practice. We had pretzels. We had like those, what are those things called? Those little Nabisco things, you know, we had them. Anyways, we had some stuff to eat on the scores table. And so one thing we would bet is how many times Brad would stick his hand in was it three things? Three different jars that Brad would stick his hand in and stand there and eat them. And so we started keeping it up on the scoreboard. We had pretzels, we had Chex Mix, we had something else. And then the guy who, you know, was the closest to, you know, how many times Brad stuck his hand in there won the money. It was that, and then how long it would take Frank before Frank exploded and started yelling at the 7-footer. And it was, we were all in the middle. Judge, tell you, it's the gospel truth. We'd stand in the middle, we'd all bet, and then we'd all have to pay up. Pay the winner. But Brad was, we always bet on Brad because Brad stuck his hand in the jar more than anyone.
Coach, we got about 6 minutes left. The one question from somebody's on the webinar, which the numbers are fantastic.
6 minutes left for the whole thing?
Yeah, for today, for you.
Wow.
How much time?
I love Q&A.
How much time do you spend a day showing film on your opponents to your players during the season?
Not a lot. I mean, we'll do a scouting report, and they'll watch a scouting report, which kind of breaks down tendencies and what guys want to do. But I mean, our guys can go to their phone and flip and watch any game they want to watch. They can go to their phone. They can watch a scouting report. What else can they watch? Edits, like our scouting edit. Brian McIntyre, a film guy, right there. He knows. But right, they can just click on their phone, right? Click on their phone and they can watch it on their phone. I'm not saying they do, but they. But.
Knowing what you know, having coach come in and out, what advice would you give a young coach that's starting in the business to move up in the business?
Sell insurance. No, it's a very, very fulfilling occupation. You know, it's if you do it the right way, you know you can feel good about yourself. You feel good about the people around you. You feel good about your players. I mean, it's better than working time. Really, it's hard though. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to break into. You need breaks. You know, I was fortunate. You know, if I didn't come from, I guess if I wasn't a decent enough player to play at the high level, major level, I think that opened some doors. But I you know, my dad, playing for my dad, the camp. I mean, my dad did one of the first like all-star camps, and I'm standing there. Here comes Lou Olson, you know. Here comes Fred Taylor. Here comes, you know, just guy after guy after guy coming in and watching these guys, and I got to meet those guys, you know. Actually, I was Garf walking around with the bag. Yeah, I'm like, that was my only thing to my dad. I get the bag. What are you talking about bag? I said, I get the bag, man. They got to come get the roster from me. That's the only thing I wanted. Then that way I got to meet all those guys, you know.
Coach, last question. Sorry, Troy, last question. There's a rumor out there about what happens in practice if you turn the ball over. Anything you want to talk about how you discipline or how you take care of or discourage turnovers?
I don't discipline anybody. I try to help them get in better shape.
Would you like to expound on that?
Well, we have treadmills that go, I believe it's 17 miles an hour, top end, 18 miles an hour. And that's no joke now. You ever get on one run 18 miles an hour? like my guys will always say, "What's it like, Coach? Tell me what it's like. What's it like?" You know, when they first come in, tell me what it's like. I said, "What do you mean, what's it like?" I'm like, "How fast does it go?" I said, "Come on out here and get in front of my car. I'll show you." You know, 18 miles an hour, you got to run, man. You know, you can't. It's not like. See, here's what happened. I'm gonna try to tell you real quick what happened. So at Cincinnati, when they screwed up, we'd send them over. They'd run sprints, right? So we got them over there running sprints. Well, and I sent my trainer over there with them. So the next thing I know, they're arguing with the trainer. I didn't miss the line. I made it. I didn't. So now I got to go over there. And so now you're over there, you know, coaching the misfits, the degenerates, instead of coaching the good guys, you know? So I got tired of that, man. So then we got the treadmills. The treadmills are great, you know, and my strength coach does it so they don't fool them. So they go over, they get on a treadmill, you know, depends on, you know, the day. I mean, it could be 30 seconds. It could be 45 seconds, but you got to run. Kevin Jones had the greatest deal. One of our freshmen said to him, "How do I prepare for the treadmill?" He said, "You can't." And the guy said, "No, KJ, seriously, how do you prepare for the treadmill?" He said, "You can't." He said, "What do you mean?" I mean, if I get on here and I start running, I got to like, you know, I got to like prepare for it, right? He goes, "You can't prepare for it, man. I keep telling you. Here's what happens. If you don't go rebound, and when you're supposed to go rebound, they say, go get on a treadmill." He said, "Now you get on a treadmill, you're going 18 miles an hour for whatever, 30 seconds, 45 seconds. You're tired, man. You're really tired. So now you're tired over there. They say, get back in. So now you get back in. You're really tired. So now you know you're supposed to go in there and rebound, but you don't get in there and rebound. They say, KJ, go get on the treadmill again. I told you go rebound." So now you're over there you're on a treadmill again. Now you come over. Now you're really tired. They say, get back in. He said, "Man, you can't train for that." That's true story time.
I know. Coach, we got to go. Hey, can we call and get you on again sometime?
I'm just enjoying it.
I know it.
This I enjoy.
Can we get you on again sometime?
As long as I don't have to X and O.
Troy, we got to go. Brian Wardle in 2 minutes. Coach, thanks so much.
Give
Great
Brian
friend. You're a good man. Thanks for everything. Stay safe.
Give Brian my best, will you?
I will. I'll tell him right now. Thanks, Coach.
Man. All right.
Thanks, Ryan.